Good day and welcome to this first day of the 10-day chess challenge. I'm excited to present this course to you because I believe you can improve your game significantly by doing it. And the reason I'm so confident that you're going to improve your game is because I'm going to focus on the two most important thinking methods in chess. That is your calculation thinking method and your evaluation thinking method. Now in this video I'm going to first focus on the first one, the calculation method. There's a summary of the method just below the video if you want to have a quick look at that. And I'm going to explain how this method works by using this example. The thinking method is a 5-step method, and the first step is to find your opponent's threats. Now they say in war, the first principle is that you must know your enemy. So in calculation it's the same. Before you can start calculating moves, you have to know what your opponent is threatening. There's no point calculating some deep variation if your opponent is threatening a checkmate against you. So that's why it's important to, first of all, focus on your opponent's threats. Once you know the threats, then you will have liberty to start calculating some tactics of your own. So let's see in this position, black is threatening to capture our pawn. And he's also threatening to possibly exchange his queen for 2 rooks. For example, he'll take our rook, and then if we take his queen, then with that rook he'll capture our rook, and he gets 2 rooks for his queen. Okay, at least it's not a checkmate threat, but we have to be aware that black has these kind of resources in the position. Okay, now that at least we know that black is not threatening some kind of checkmate against us, or to capture our queen or something like that, we can move on to the next step, which is identifying all the targets and the motives. Now a target is a piece or a pawn that we are already attacking or can easily attack. So for example, this rook is a target because we're already attacking him, putting pressure on him. The king is definitely a target because we can easily check him. This queen is not really a target because there's no way to attack her. If we attack her with the pawn, then we simply lose the pawn. We didn't deal with that threat then, so there's no other way to effectively attack the queen, and there's also no way to effectively attack this rook. So that's the two targets we'll have to work with. Okay, let's go on by calculating all the checks first of all. Okay, here's the only check that makes any sense, but after the king moves out of check, it seems that we don't achieve much more, because now after this there's not much more we can do. Maybe we can take check, but if he takes back, it seems like we didn't achieve much. Okay, so the check move didn't work. Now we look at captures. If we capture the rook and he captures us back, well, there aren't any other checks or captures. Or here's a capture, and after he takes, we see we can win a pawn, so that's not too bad. We have to keep in mind that we can win that pawn, but let's see if we can do even better. Okay, so when the obvious checks and the obvious captures don't lead to anything special, then you should have a deeper look at the motives. And a motive in this position is this pin. White can play the queen to h4 and pin the black rook to the king. Now the pin is a very effective tactical motive. As a matter of fact, you might even hear the quote chess players say that the pin is mightier than the sword. Okay, and this move is actually the solution move because white is winning the rook. There's nothing black can do to prevent us from capturing. If black tries to hang on with a move like queen to b4, then we've got another tactical motive called attacking the defender. You see, this simple pawn move puts pressure on the defender, and the queen wants to protect the rook, but she's forced to abandon this diagonal because all the squares are covered. For example, after queen takes d4, we win the rook. Okay, so that was the first example of how the calculation process works in action. I'm going to show you one more example. On purpose, I chose a position that seems rather complicated with a lot of pieces on the board here to show you how the calculation process can work. Now the first step is to identify our opponent's threats. Now luckily it seems that black doesn't have any serious threats against us. By the way, identifying your opponent's threats is essentially doing the calculation process from your opponent's point of view. In other words, you're trying to see where can my opponent check me, where can he capture me, and where can he threaten me. And in this position, there doesn't seem to be any serious threats that black has against us. So that gives us liberty to move on to the next step, which is identifying all the targets and motifs. Here's an obvious target because we're already attacking the knight. And the queen is also a target because we can put the knight on d5 and attack the queen. So the queen is a possible target. This knight is not really a target because we can't attack him. If we push the pawn up, then black can just capture us and we didn't achieve anything. Okay, so this seems to be the two targets that we'll have to focus on. Next we look at the motifs. And the first motif you should notice here is, with the rook being on the same file as the queen, there's going to be possible discovered attacks on this file. For example, if these three pieces are removed, then white will discover attack on black's queen. This leads us to see another motif, which is if we play the knight to d5, black can't really capture us, because if we does, we capture with this pawn and suddenly this motif shows itself clearly, because this knight is now pinned and we're going to win the knight on the next move. Okay. Another motif we are to see here is if we play the knight to d5, there's a possibility of checking the king on e7, which will create a fork between the king and the c6 square. Alright, so that's the motifs that we have to keep in mind when we go to our third step, which is calculating all the checks. Now since there aren't any checks, we go on to the next step, which is to calculate all the captures. The only capture in this position is to play knight takes c6, but after queen takes c6 we don't have any more captures, we don't have any more checks, we don't have any more serious threats, so it seems like we only helped black to release some pressure on his position, so the capture move can't be good. Next we look at threats or tempo moves. A tempo move is a move that makes a serious threat against your opponent, and this is a tempo move because we are attacking black's queen. And as we've already seen, black can't capture, else we're going to capture with the pawn and win the knight on the next move. So that means black is forced to move the queen. However, black will want to put the queen on a square where he still protects the knight, because we're threatening the knight as well. So the queen would go either to d7 or to b7. Let's say the queen go to b7. And now you can see the other motive come into play again, because after knight takes knight, queen takes knight, knight to e7 check wins the queen. The king has to move out of check and we get the queen. Okay, so this was another example of how the calculation thinking method works in practice. Now, in order to become better at this calculation method, you'll have to practice it, and that's why I added some exercises. And during the course of this challenge, I'm going to give you numerous exercises whereby you can practice this tactical thinking method. And let me just say, if you are serious about improving your game, then you should take these exercises seriously, because they were specifically designed to help you improve your calculation process. Okay, so there's some exercises if you scroll down the page, and you can do them now, and I'll see you around. Cheers.